Welcome to this explainer, where we're doing something a little bit different today. We are going to dive straight into an immersive first-person biological journey. Imagine your life beginning as a literal microscopic speck braving the open ocean. Well, today you're going to hear exactly what that's like, from a tiny, vulnerable egg all the way to the final tide. This is the memoir of a sea crab. The story begins with a rather poignant reflection. My name is Crab. Today I am an old creature of the sea, my shell worn by time and battles. You know, the tides that once carried this creature now kind of just whisper its final memories. It's lived long enough to look back on a journey of absolutely staggering odds. A journey that started, believe it or not, before it even had claws, eyes, or a shell. So let's start at the very beginning with Chapter 1, From Egg to Ocean. Hundreds of thousands. Just pause and think about that number for a second. That is the staggering volume of siblings this crab had right off the bat. The mother protected them all beneath her abdomen, where they honestly just looked like a small orange sponge. For weeks, she's down there carefully cleaning and aerating them, fending off predators and disease, and inside each egg, which by the way is no larger than a single grain of sand, is the complete biological blueprint for a complex life. The odds are astronomically stacked against any single one of them surviving from day one, but guided by the moon and the tides, the mother eventually releases them into the dark, open sea. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the newborn crab doesn't enter the world looking anything like a crab. It starts as what's called a zoa. It's completely transparent, covered in these long, protective spines, and it's got these disproportionately massive eyes and tiny little swimming appendages. It has absolutely zero control over where it's going. Drifting entirely helplessly, it is 100% at the mercy of the vast ocean currents. And drifting in the open sea? Well, that means running a terrifying daily gauntlet. You've got fish hunting from above, jellyfish silently swallowing up siblings by the dozen, and just a multitude of tiny marine predators consuming thousands of these larvae in one go. I mean, only a minute fraction of the siblings actually survive this stage. To stay alive, our little Zoea has to constantly consume microscopic plankton floating in the water around it, desperately trying to build up just enough energy to trigger its very first major transformation. Which brings us to Chapter 2, The Great Transformations. Okay, growing up is hard, right? But growing is literally terrifying when you wear an exoskeleton. You can't just stretch. The old shell physically has to crack open, and the crab has to meticulously wriggle its soft body out. But the escape isn't even the hardest part. The real danger is what comes right after. For a short window of time, the crab's body remains completely soft and vulnerable. Any predator could just easily snap it up. So it has to hide in absolute stillness until that new shell finally hardens. Molting is absolutely crucial. It's the only way to grow, but it leaves the crab temporarily defenseless against the entire ocean. But if it survives several of these terrifying molts, it transforms into something called a megalopa. And for the very first time, it actually kind of looks like a crab. It develops tiny claws, much stronger legs, and a wider body. But here is the real game changer. It finally gains swimming control. The ocean currents no longer dictate its fate. It uses this incredible new superpower to leave the highly dangerous open ocean and seek out a sheltered coastal estuary, where its real life can finally begin. The contrast here is just stark. We're looking at a shift from a completely helpless, transparent larva being blown about by the sea to an armored, clawed juvenile taking its first deliberate, empowering steps on the ocean floor. With its next successful molt, it's finally free to navigate the seabed. It's no longer just drifting along for the ride. For the first time, it is firmly in control. Let's move to and see how this builds across the crab's lifespan. It's a relentless battle against time. It spends mere days as a fragile egg, weeks floating dangerously as a zoea larva, and months developing as a megalopa. But against all odds, through sheer luck and an incredible survival instinct, it manages to stretch those months into years as a juvenile, and eventually a full-grown adult crab. Now we enter Chapter 3, Surviving the Seabed. To fuel all this continued growth, our crab has to become the ultimate opportunist. Honestly, it'll eat almost anything it can find. Small shellfish, worms, dead fish sinking from above, algae, and even the scattered leftovers from much larger predators. Its claws become absolutely essential tools. It uses them for everything, crushing hard shells, tearing meat apart, and basically gathering every single ounce of energy required to prepare for the next dangerous molt. There's a thought from the memoir that really stands out. Every scar on my shell tells a story. Every missing notch marks a battle survived. Securing good shelter meant fighting territory wars with rival crabs, literally locking claws and colliding shells over the best crevices. Sometimes a claw's lost in battle, but incredibly, nature gives the crab a second chance, regenerating it over future molts. And that doesn't even account for the narrow escapes from hungry octopuses, heavy fishing nets, and massive coastal storms.
Moving right along to Chapter 4, Mating and Maturity.
Reaching full maturity completely shifts the biological imperative. It's no longer just about keeping yourself alive, it's about continuing the ancient species. Finding a mate is a really delicate process, and timing is absolutely critical. Mating often occurs shortly after the female molts, which means her shell remains completely soft and vulnerable. The male has to step up, fiercely protecting her during this period so they can safely mate. And, months later, she'll carry hundreds of thousands of eggs, restarting the exact same cycle we just talked about. As the seasons pass and the crab ages, its weapons for survival fundamentally change. In its youth, it relied heavily on brute physical strength, heavy claws, and a tendency to just rush headlong into danger. But in old age, experience becomes its greatest weapon. It relies on patience. It develops a deep knowledge of the changing tides, knows exactly where storms strike the hardest, and learns how to cleverly avoid predators rather than fighting them. As we always see in nature, the sea rewards those who adapt. And that brings us to our final chapter, the final tide. In this brilliantly illustrates the final stage of the journey. As the crab rests beneath a familiar rock and its movements finally slow, its end is not a tragedy. It's actually an ecological necessity. When the crab finally passes, its body will be broken down by tiny organisms, releasing incredibly rich nutrients back into the water. Ocean currents will then distribute those nutrients across the habitat, nourishing the entire ecosystem. This fuels fish, coral, and, remarkably, brand new crabs. Nothing is ever wasted in nature. The crab's end is literally just the fuel for new beginnings. So, what does it take to survive a lifetime in the infinite tide? To brave the relentless predators, the crushing storms, the absolutely terrifying physical transformations, only to gracefully give it all back to the sea at the very end? It's a profound question, isn't it? The story of the sea crab is the ultimate testament to the raw resilience of life and nature's beautiful, endless cycle. It really makes you wonder what other incredible, unnoticed memoirs are being written beneath the waves right now, doesn't it?